welcome to another edition of the One Percenters. And today it's myself and it is Hammer. Hammer, how are you?
I'm good, unlike Faraz and Kazim.
Yeah, you might notice that Faraz, our regular host, and Kazim are both away today. They're both injured, nursing injuries, but hopefully they'll be back next week. All right, so today we wanted to talk about the fixture rush. I know, everybody's been asking, what do we do games weeks 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17? They're all in the space of 2 weeks. So I think, Hammer, if we've got that coming up, I'm sure it's you're excited about this part of the season. 5 game weeks in the space of 2 weeks. A lot of movement in terms of rank here.
Always excited. So many games coming up, so many differentials. It's always an exciting time.
Yeah, it can make or break your season. All right. So before we get going, first of all, thank you to Footsapp, our sponsor for this this podcast. If you haven't had a chance to download it, go ahead. It makes organizing your football matches a lot easier. Okay. All right, and before we get to game week 14 onwards, let's talk about the game week. It's still ongoing. There's still a couple of games left. But yesterday, any players, any results caught your fancy there, Hammer?
Yeah, the Liverpool game was interesting because it showed us something about the Liverpool team. I guess at the beginning of the season, we all talked about how teams are going up and down. We don't know who's going to do well and who won't. But that game showed us that maybe Liverpool assets are still there to be relied on. And Spurs look really good with Son and Kane, so they're proving form over fixtures. City, 50-50, still not sure, but they have good fixtures coming up. But yeah, and Leeds, of course, with the 5 goals, they look lively.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the top things. Leeds looking lively. Yeah, I agree. I think, after Man City had a couple of big results, everybody was hoping on a good result from them against West Brom. I think most people captain KDB, myself included. He got 4 points because he got 2 bonus. I don't know if that's counted as a blank. I think I'll count it as a return. But I know you yourself have captained Bruno, so you're looking for a big result today.
Yeah, and I know just figured out he's starting, so that's good too. So we'll see. I'll wait to keep it.
Yeah, good stuff. And then the Chelsea dilemma. We talked about it before. They missed out on their clean sheet. A lot of people banking on that. And again, Timo blanked. So it's, problematic. So, just going ahead, just talking about Leeds in general, 5 goals. What do you think? I think, you think they're good for buying their cheap midfield and forward assets?
Yeah, I think everybody has Bamford, or if you don't, then you should get Bamford. He's one of their best forwards and most reliable forwards. For the others, it's tough. Like even for the 5 goals they scored, I think it was all 5 different players. The ones that I noticed are consistent based on their stats were Click and Harrison. That at least every 2 or 3 games they get you an assist or a goal. So at least there, if you're looking for Leeds players, those are good options. The others, they won't score 5 goals every game. Like, so that's the same thing we said with Villa when they scored 7 against Liverpool. They're not going to score 7 every game. They're good. Once in a while, they'll get the 5 goals, but they're good to score a goal every game. So you want at least one of their players. Don't go doubling up on the Leeds players.
Great. A couple of decent enablers there from Leeds as well. I think Bamford, like you said, is highly owned, and then the guys you mentioned. I think Rodrigo got some points yesterday as well. So some options there if you need some players. But again, Spurs, Son on the mark again. We talked about him last week. He has low XG, and that's why we've put there he's an XG killer. He had 1 shot, 1 goal. You can't argue with that, and he got a couple of bonus. I think he ended up with 9 points yesterday.
Yeah, he's a high percentage shooter. Like that's one thing we've known over the past too. Like give him a chance to pull it in, but he's not someone who'll take 50 shots on goal. It's 1 shot, 1 goal, or nothing.
Yeah, agreed. And then, the other point we've got up there is Jamie Vardy. So, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a discussion, is it worth bringing him in for a nice run of fixtures? And he had Fulham, Sheffield United, Brighton, and Everton. So it's 4 games. And then just tallying up the points, he managed to get 28 points, which you think over 4 games isn't that bad. But, I think everybody was hoping for a little bit more over that 4-game spell. And if you go back and look at Harry Kane, he managed 25. So only 3 extra points there that Vardy did over, Harry Kane's tough fixtures. So, I know you made that punt as well. What do you think? Was that a success, or do you think it might have been just stay with Harry Kane and save the transfer?
No, so I made two transfers that time. So I changed Kane to Vardy, and that allowed me to bring in Cancelo in defense with the extra cash. So Cancelo got me 2 clean sheets in that run as well. So I see that as a plus. At the same time, I removed Vardy before this week's two-pointer, right? So I'm hoping Watkins can score a couple goals, and that total should add up. Then without the two, he still gets 26 in 3 games, so the average looks much better. But overall, if you're looking at the difference between the two, they did pretty well. Like Kane and Vardy did pretty well. So if you just did a 1-for-1, you didn't lose out on anything, and you made some extra money.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think this season, the way they're going is, it's difficult to pick, and we've talked about it before, it's difficult to pick one fixture where you'd pick a player, but over a stretch of 4 or 5 games, if you have a good player with good fixtures, he's going to get you the points.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is like going forward from this point forward, if you're looking at Leicester's next 4 games, they have Spurs, United, Palace, and then Newcastle. The Newcastle game looks good. But then on the other hand, Kane has Leicester, Wolves, Fulham, and Leeds. So his fixtures are looking much better going forward. So if you're looking to swing back, then yeah, I would swing back to Kane for the next 4.
Yeah. And that's actually a nice segue onto the next slide that we've put together. So if you just want to move on to the next one. So we've put together, the Christmas fixture list. So this is what, game week 14, 15, 16, and 17, all within the space of 12 days. So, we've put the game weeks there for you, 19th, 26th, 28th, and 1st. And you'll see there, we've outlined the fixtures. And, looking at this, you think, okay, which players do I want to target? And you think Liverpool, their fixtures, Palace, West Brom, Newcastle, Southampton. You look at Leicester, you look at Man City, you look at Tottenham, you look at Man United. All of the top teams, you think, you know what, they've got a good run. They might have one tough game in there, like Spurs and Leicester meet each other. And even Chelsea, they've got, West Ham, Arsenal, Villa, and then Man City. So everybody's got at least 3 good games there. So there could be a lot of good players or a lot of good teams with different players scoring a lot of points over this time.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, especially since it's the Christmas period. So you'll have a lot of players getting benched, a lot of players getting rested from game to game. So you have to be careful who you're picking. You have to be careful with your transfers, but I think more or less will be the tried and the tested. So Chelsea, yeah, they look good, but again, we've seen how Timo Werner hasn't been doing so well. Ziyech has been injured, so they're missing that creative force. Havertz hasn't been doing well. So it's tough to bring in a Chelsea asset unless you have their defenders. They may do well. But I'm also looking at Burnley. I see their fixtures doing well. So you're looking at their defenders. They might do well during this period. So that's a good differential. And it's coming back to that City fixture, right? So we know KDB blanked against West Brom, but their next 4 fixtures are really good. So don't lose faith in City just yet, right? It's not a one game ends everything, but they might still do well over the next 3 with Southampton, Newcastle, and Everton.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, you hit the nail on the head there. Burnley and Chelsea, look at their defense. Liverpool, Man United, Man City, look at their attacking players. And, looking at that run for Newcastle, they've got a game against Fulham coming up, but then after that, City, Liverpool, Leicester. So if you have Callum Wilson, I know a lot of people do, it might be a good time to ship him after the Fulham game.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then, just moving on to the next slide, one of the things you mentioned there was the rotation risk. So, this is one thing where Jurgen Klopp is complaining about fixtures, but if you look at the fixtures, and this is the break between the games, Liverpool right now, on average, have the best break between their games.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I don't see him rotating as much. He doesn't seem to have many options either with Jota injured. But you never know it, especially with his midfielders. But if you have Salah or Mane, they might get rested 1 game or 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You look at City. I think they've got a nice big squad, so they're looking at rotation there. But for teams like Manchester United and Liverpool, I think their first teams are strong, and then it's their subs that they may have injuries or they're not as weak. So it's difficult to see much rotation there. Even with Tottenham, I think people like Harry Kane and Son, unless they're injured or unless they've got a little knock, I think Jose is going to try and play them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think Kane and Son are like nailed in. I don't see them ever getting benched because I think Mourinho wants to win the title this year, and he knows that are his 2 best players. I see for United, I do see Fernandes or Rashford getting benched for one game at least, with Van de Beek or Martial coming in, or Cavani if he doesn't get suspended. But I do see all those players coming on at halftime or at 60 minutes because the other options aren't as good. And the
Yeah.
same applies to City. Like even if Kevin De Bruyne or Sterling were to get benched, if they have a bad game, you can see them coming on, right? It's just try to have at least someone on your bench and not have zeros on the bench just in case. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And one thing to note, it's, after game week 17, which is on the first week of January, there is, almost a 2-week break for all of the Premier League teams. Well, when I say break, a break between Premier League fixtures, because then it's the FA Cup third round. So you'd expect a lot of these teams to rest players there. So, they may play their players for these 3-4 games and then just rest them for the FA Cup match.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, moving on to the next slide, which is looking ahead. So we've talked about Chelsea, we've talked about Timo Werner, great record last season in Germany, but
Yeah.
not really doing the business for Chelsea this year. So if you've got 9.4 million or 9.3 million, spent on him, what do you think? I mean, I know this would be a question for Kazim, being a Chelsea fan, but
Yeah.
what's your opinion on Timo? Time to ship him?
Yeah, it's just the way they play, right? So Timo plays on the wing, and he's a forward in FPL. So you want him at the end of the goals, where Giroud or Abraham is playing, and they're the ones getting the goals because they're the ones getting at the end of each delivery from James and Chilwell. Whereas Timo Werner is the one playing it off to James before the cross comes in, right? So he's not getting any points, but even though he's the one maybe assisting James on the cross, right? So you don't want somebody who's playing on the wing as a striker. You want somebody out and out as a striker who's scoring those goals. So I would drop Timo if you have that money. He just hasn't proven it over the first few games.
Yeah, and this is the way he's playing this season. It could be a bit like Aubameyang, where next season they just put him in as a midfielder.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
he's playing that wide role. But I think Frank still hasn't figured out how to use his new players in the best or most efficient way.
Yeah, it's the same. I go back to last year with Christian Pulisic. I think at the beginning we said the same thing. Right, he wasn't doing anything playing off the wing. Right, he wasn't scoring any goals. He was decent, but wasn't there were no end results. Then after that, he figured it out. He realized that he can take on the players. He started going through. He got his confidence back, and that's maybe something we're looking at Timo Werner. We're looking for that breakout game, and then you have to call on that form and take that risk with Werner. But at the moment, is not worth the risk.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And City, we spoke about already. Their defense, they kept 6 clean sheets in a row. They were looking good. I conceded an unlucky own goal this season, this last week. But what do you think? Keep them, ship them?
Yeah, I think I was looking at their next 4 fixtures. They have good fixtures coming up. So I think from a defensive perspective, you keep if you have Cancelo, if you have Diaz, you keep them. Just be aware that they might get benched for 1 or 2 games. So you might get 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 4 games. So it's having someone on your bench to come in if you have that City player. That's the
Yeah.
risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and people like John Stones at 4.8 million, it was really tempting. I was actually considering bringing him in because he had a good run. He was playing well, and I didn't in the end, and he didn't even play. So it was lucky move,
Yeah.
but
Well,
lucky that I didn't bring him in.
the rumor is that he was rested for Southampton, so we'll see.
We'll see if he comes in. Yeah, because Ake got a start. I was quite surprised by that.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the other things is, it always pops up as a question is DCL. Everton aren't doing well, but he keeps ticking over. And, if you've had him from early on in the season, I think his price is up to 7.5, maybe just over right now. So, is it worth downgrading to somebody who's maybe 6.5 and saving that million and using that to upgrade your midfield or defense? Or do you think DCL this season is one of those guys that, you just want to keep him because he's going to keep, getting at least a goal or an assist a game?
Yeah, so I actually went through his fixtures and I dropped him just because he's been getting 1 return a game. There are quite a few strikers who are getting 1 return a game. Like you have Che Adams who's been doing decently well. Bamford's doing well right now. Benteke before his red card was hitting form, right? So there are other players who take that risk on. The way I see it, so he's at 7.9. The way I saw it is after 3 or 2 weeks, I want to bring an Everton player back once their fixtures get better. But the player I'm looking at is Richarlison because he's also on penalties and he's 0.1 cheaper than DCL, right? So he's at 7.8, DCL is at 7.9. He seems like a good differential. is not someone worth dropping. He's only not returned in 2 games. So if you got him at 7 million, you're just living it. You're loving it. The reason I dropped him is the value he brought to the team. So the extra money allowed me to bring in Kevin De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes in midfield.
Yeah.
So I use that extra value. Whereas if you're holding on to him and you like your team, he's not a bad option to keep. He'll be a good differential since a lot of people will think about dropping him going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't realized that Richarlison had dropped 0.2 million and DCL had gone up by 0.9. So now he's actually more expensive. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, looking ahead to this week's fixtures, we talked about the next 4 fixtures, but looking ahead at this week's fixtures, I'm just myself, you look at Man United at home to Leeds, you think that's a good fixture for a captain option. Even Liverpool away to Palace is not bad. And, Man City away to Southampton, I don't think that's too bad of a fixture, even though Southampton have been doing well at the back. I think off the back of Man City's result this week, I think they'll be going for it on Saturday.
Yeah, it's from a captain perspective, it's one of those weird weeks because I think from a rule perspective, we always say Captain Salah at home, Captain Bruno away. So this week it's the opposite. Bruno's playing at home to Leeds, Salah's playing away to Palace, and I think if we look at the stats, Bruno has blanked in like 3 home games. So those matchups don't look good from a form perspective. City against Southampton, if you're just looking at the fixture, it looks like a very difficult fixture for City. Everton, Arsenal looks difficult for Arsenal, but also for Everton. I think Chelsea, West Ham looks promising. For United, if you're looking at Rashford or Martial, maybe if it's a high-scoring game, it looks a bit better. But it's tough this week. The key I'm looking at this week is Spurs-Leicester. I'm thinking Spurs at home after the loss to Liverpool, that they'll come out firing. They know they need to get that win in the bank and try to get their form back again. So I think Kane or Son against Leicester would be a good shout.
Yeah, and just thinking about football, not FPL for a minute, both those teams like to play on the counter-attack, so it'll be interesting to see how that game goes.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that, the next slide is the differentials, which we didn't really get to because of the timing between the fixtures. But I've gone for Ollie Watkins. I think he's got a game against Palace. I know did you have any idea of who you'd pick as a differential if you needed to climb up the ranks?
Yeah, I'm thinking if you're looking at a striker, and again, I'm looking at dropping DCL, or if you have like a Jamie Vardy and you want extra funding, I'm looking at Che Adams. He's really consistent. He's doing the work up front. And with Danny Ings back, he's also getting a lot of potential on the assist side. Plus, I know he plays City, but City's defense has looked suspect. So I'm thinking Che Adams, not just for this week, but going forward, is a very good option.
Yeah, I think at 6 or 6.1 million, he's not a bad shout for a longer term. Okay. And then, just moving on, final thoughts. I think, plan your transfers. I think, look at the next 4 game weeks. We outlined them earlier in the show. Just have a plan to stack up on the teams with favorable fixtures and players that you think won't be rotated as much. And I think the next 4 game weeks, you'll see the tables will be upside down in terms of FPL. I think, if you can score well over the next 4 weeks, you could be in 20th position in your mini league and you could shoot up to 5th place very easily.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I say to anyone who's listening, reach this far, don't overthink it, right? If you have 1 free transfer, what I would do is maybe keep your transfer and get the 2 free. This will also help you plan for the 3-4 weeks from now, especially after the January break. At the same time, don't worry too much about your team. Don't base your analysis on 1 game. So don't go dropping KDB just because he got a 2-pointer. Right? Don't worry. These are players that do well over a season. They might not do well in 1 game.
Yeah, and that was 4 points, and I count that as a return. Yeah. So
that's true.
It's like getting an assist and then getting booked, right? That's how I'm looking at it. So
it's
all good. It's all good. All right. Well, thanks, Hammer. I think we'll be back next week at the usual time, and hopefully Faraz and Kazim will be back. But it's been enjoyable. Thanks again, Hammer.